Welcome back to Story Time with Miss T. Remember, last week I told you we were going to be learning about another one of God's servants who always did what God said. And that servant's name was Joseph. We're going to read about Joseph's coat of many colors. And this book is adapted by Cassandra Hames. It's illustrated by Joven and other illustrations by Vanessa and Wren. Let's find out about this servant of God and his coat. Now Israel loved Joseph, and he made him a coat of many colors. We find that in Genesis, the 37th chapter, verse 3, in your Bibles. These are all stories in the very first chapter of the Bible. Jacob was a man who loved God. And because he was one of God's chosen people, God blessed Jacob with an amazing life. He had land, livestock, and sons. Jacob had 12 sons. But Jacob loved one son more than the others. His name was Joseph. There's Joseph. Jacob loved Joseph so much that he gave him a special coat. Joseph's coat was beautiful and woven with all the colors of the rainbow. He wore it often. The colorful coat made Jacob's other sons jealous. They didn't like how their father favored Joseph. But it wasn't just Jacob who was to blame. Joseph often bragged about his status. Nobody likes someone who brags all the time, do they? Let's see what's going to happen to Joseph. I had a dream last night that your stalks of wheat were bowing down to mine, he told his brothers. And another dream where the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. What are you saying? That one day we'll bow down to you? One brother asked angrily. The brothers were upset with Joseph for sharing his dreams, and they decided to get rid of him once and for all. The other brothers didn't like Joseph bragging. They captured Joseph, tore off his colorful coat, and sold him to some merchants. Then they took his coat and dipped it in goat's blood and showed it to their father. There's Joseph being sold to the merchants, and they're off on their way to another land. Oh no, Jacob cried. Joseph has been attacked by a wild animal. For days, Jacob wept over the loss of his favorite son. But little did he know, God was with Joseph. Jacob is so sad. Meanwhile, the merchants had sold Joseph to a man called Potiphar, who was an official to the Pharaoh of Egypt. The Pharaoh was the top man in Egypt. He was like a king. When Potiphar threw Joseph in jail, Joseph trusted God to help him. And he did. God gave Joseph the power to interpret dreams. Wonder how that's going to help him. Let's find out. While Joseph was in jail, he met a cupbearer who needed someone to explain his dream. The cupbearer said to Joseph, I had a dream that I squeezed grapes into Pharaoh's cup. What do you think that could mean? There's Joseph in Egypt. Joseph replied, "Your dream means that in 3 days you'll be Pharaoh's cupbearer again." And Joseph was right. A few days later, the cupbearer was at Pharaoh's side once again. And because God was with Joseph, all the dreams he interpreted came true. 2 years later, Pharaoh himself had a dream that needed interpreting. That means he needed to know what it meant. Many men in Egypt tried to translate Pharaoh's dream, but they were all wrong. One day, his cupbearer said, "I met a man in jail once who could interpret dreams." "Bring him to me," said Pharaoh. And so Joseph was brought to the high Pharaoh to interpret his dreams. Pharaoh explained to Joseph that in his dream, 7 skinny cows ate 7 fat cows. And he had another dream where 7 stacks of withered grain ate 7 full heads of grain. "What might this mean?" he asked. There's the cupbearer. "With the help of God, I'll be able to interpret your dreams," said Joseph. "God is sending you a message. Your dream means that 7 years of good harvest will come to Egypt, and 7 years of famine will follow." Pharaoh was so impressed with Joseph's interpretation that he put him in charge during the years of the great harvest and famine. Because God was with Joseph, he made him successful in all that he did. See, there's the 7 cows, fat cows, and the 7 skinny cows, and the 7 full grains and the 7 skinny grains that Pharaoh dreamed about. When the famine came, everyone from around the world bought grain from Joseph because the harvest was so plentiful in Egypt. Back home, Jacob and his sons were starving. "Go buy food in Egypt," he told his sons. When his brothers arrived, they didn't recognize Joseph. They had no idea Joseph was in charge of all the grain in Egypt. But Joseph knew who they were. They bowed down to him and pleaded for food. It was just like Joseph's dream. Joseph wept because he was so happy to see them. He said, "Brothers, it's me, Joseph." At first, the brothers were too shocked to speak. "We sold you to merchants," they cried. "Don't be afraid," said Joseph. "This was all part of God's plan. I've been able to save many lives through this famine because he has been with me this whole time." This exciting news made all the brothers happy and relieved. Joseph had forgiven him. Pharaoh was so moved by that he ordered Joseph's brothers to be brought back home and to bring their families and their father Jacob to come live in Egypt. "I'll give you and your family the best land in Egypt," Pharaoh told them. So the brothers went back to the land of Canaan and told their father the good news. "Joseph is alive!" shouted one brother. See, there they are, all in Egypt, getting their grain to take back to their father, and finding out that their brother is still alive. So they shouted to Jacob that Joseph is still alive and in charge of all the grain in Egypt, added another. Pharaoh has set aside the best land in all Egypt for us to live on. Jacob was overjoyed. They packed and headed for Egypt. While on their journey, God spoke to him. "Jacob," God said, "going to Egypt is all part of my big plan for you. Your family will help me build a great nation, and I will be with you the entire time. Go and live out my promise." So Jacob went happily to Egypt. When he saw Joseph, he hugged him for a long time. He was overjoyed to be reunited with his son. They all lived happily in Egypt for a long, long time. So that's the story of Joseph and his coat of many colors. I hope you've all enjoyed going back to Sunday school with all of us. I've enjoyed being able to read it to you. I hope you'll join us again when we will look at some more Bible stories. See you then.